Madam Speaker, every major speech I've given in this House has centered on our need to fight for our unity. It is one of the richest parts of the inheritance we have received from our founding generation. And if we lose our unity as a country, we will lose our name in this world, and we lose everything. So it is something that I will always defend. So it does grieve and anger me to see so much of our country's reputation and trust being squandered on a social media war of all things. If all this turns out to be nothing more than some personal game of brinksmanship being played, rather than a genuine desire to improve our political process, then I think there will be many angry and hurt Singaporeans to be reckoned with. Because for us ordinary Singaporeans, be we supporters of the establishment or supporters of the opposition, this is not about what's to happen to one house. This is about what we want to happen to the country we all call our home. And to us on the ground who care, this saga is not a cynical game of cards. This is all our lives, not just one family's, but all of ours. The allegations of abuse of political corruption, state intimidation, and nepotism being made by Mr. Lee Hsien Yang are damning. The worst of the allegations that are not related to the House are presently light on details, but because of the background and well-respected name of the accusers, the allegations have to be given their due weight. If the allegations are true, then the accused must be held to account, and if the allegations are false, then the accuser must be equally held to account. Otherwise, how are we the people to make sense of those who are less powerful, who have been sued or bankrupted for equally or less defamatory remarks? For many conservative Asians, in the case of family, we will always want to protect our own, and I personally would rather we never close the option of mercy. Should there still be the slightest possibility of mediation and grace and forgiveness to still intercede in this situation and allow reconciliation and compromise to be made somehow, then I hope it can be taken. But the difficulty here, though, is that because of the seriousness of the allegations of corruption, this situation can no longer be judged according to our personal preferences or seen as just a domestic family quarrel. It is a national level political issue, and I respect the Prime Minister for recognizing it as so by opening himself up to parliamentary scrutiny. We pride ourselves as a country that governs by rule of law, so justice must be seen to be served. We the people cannot be asked to tolerate a situation where the powerful are allowed to say or do whatever they wish, not be held accountable for it, and then freely exercise their option to leave the country behind for greener pastures when they are done with their personal agenda. This is not the Singapore we want to live in, or the Singapore we have been asked to fight for. The powerful must be bound by the same principles, values, and rules that the less powerful are being asked to play by. So I agree with the Workers' Party's approach that the crux of the family issues surrounding 38 Oxley is for the family to resolve privately or in court, and that Parliament should only be concerned with the allegations of abuse of power and the harm these have caused to confidence in Singapore and our political institutions. The Prime Minister's accusers should have an independent, neutral space where they can be held to account for their words, put down their side of the story on official record, sharing whatever arguments and evidence they have to back their claims. Such a hearing can happen either as an independent select committee or a commission of inquiry, which would have full authority to investigate the accusations, to summon evidence surrounding the most biting allegations raised in the original What Has Happened to Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's Values document about the supposed misuse of power by the Prime Minister and his wife, the supposed Orwellian threat of state intimidation and monitoring, and the supposed nepotism behind key appointments in a public service. Because if investigations reveal that there is truth and substance to the accusations, then wrongs must be made right. It is presently hard to ask any questions because so far details are just so vague, and the people who can supply more detailed evidence to these questions are just not in this room. The Prime Minister has shared his hope that this full and public airing in Parliament will dispel any doubts that have been planted and strengthen confidence in our institutions and our system of government. And I hope so much for that to be true too. But from what I know of ground sentiments, I don't think that's going to happen for those who are unconverted or those who are sitting on the fence. Mr. Lee Hsien Yang has already made it clear to the many Singaporeans following his Facebook post that he believes this parliamentary session is a forum that again places Prime Minister before his subordinates, who lack sufficient background and evidence of the numerous instances of abuse and conflicts of interest, many yet to be raised. That is why I hope the Prime Minister will consider subjecting himself to an independent committee of inquiry on the allegations made against him and his government. A committee of inquiry or select committee with enough independent, non-PAP, non-subordinate representatives would help to address some of his accusers' concerns. And I understand that this is not a process to be taken lightly, and it runs the risk of stretching out a painful saga. But I believe this can be a very significant display of political courage that will shore up much trust in our system's integrity, and will also be a significant display of trust in the people who will be asked to sit on those committees. Prime Minister, I respect your decision to put forth your perspective on the Oxley issue as a statutory declaration. It is high stakes for you if you are found to be falsifying your statement, so it does show me how seriously you have considered the stakes of your words. And I also respect your decision to open this up to parliamentary debate and inviting all of us in this House to ask questions that call you into account, because every word will go down on public record on the Hansard. And your earlier sharing that you intend to put your words out in public free of parliamentary privilege is an important move that I believe will build trust. Because in this culture right now shaped by social media, where words are allowed to flow fast and free, it has become all too easy to forget why things like statutory declarations and Hansards matter. They remind us that for society to be strong, for democracy to be resilient, we must all allow the law to call us into account for our words, the things we choose to say and the things we choose not to say. Because words are the way we build or break our worlds. And since the Prime Minister has already made his statutory declaration, it would be most fair and helpful for Singaporeans to have an independent committee set up that can request that his accusers also offer theirs. Beneath all of this is the uncomfortable accusation about whether we are a country of one-man rule. And part of the reason why perceptions of authoritarianism continue to fester is that there are still many people who believe and perceive the government as opaque in its decision-making and defensive in its communication about its work. This is just a long-standing perspective on the ground that is clear to anyone who looks at contentious Facebook comment threads on any social-political issues. So the idea that anyone would see secret ministerial committees as nefarious may seem strange and even silly to those in government who are very familiar with what they are, but to someone hearing it for the first time, it can be construed to sound mysterious and Orwellian. So where there is no information and understanding given, misinformation and misunderstanding will rush in to fill the vacuum. This Oxley Road saga is painful, but there are many thoughtful commenters who don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. If anything, a deeper and more open conversation about how political power works in Singapore may be just what our system needs to truly grow up as a post-Lee Kuan Yew democracy. Our electorate needs better political education, and more open, empathetic communication about our political processes can help. Singapore is bigger than Lee Kuan Yew's values. For no matter how great or powerful or righteous any one man may be, the best of men still die, and a country must learn to live beyond them. I don't think that's an offensive thing to say, because that's a view Mr. Lee himself has held. His expressed distaste for idolization and personal monuments is something establishment and non-establishment Singaporeans can respect and get behind. If Singapore is to stay strong, we must remember this to be true. We are no country of one man. We are no country for one man. And we are a country of many people, many families, and many interests. I've been serving on the Founders Memorial Committee since 2015. Please permit me to share some insights. We've been gathering views from thousands of Singaporeans, historians, architects, regular people on the street, young people, about what kind of memorial would best honor the legacy of our founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew and the pioneering team of leaders that built the nation alongside him. And incidentally, Oxley never actually came up as a major suggestion. They wanted more public spaces like Fort Canning or the Singapore River. But what we learned is that many Singaporeans wanted a memorial that could go beyond a mere recollection of the past. They wanted a memorial to be forward-looking and ever relevant to a new generation. A memorial that didn't just center on one particular personality, but the powerful principles that could be passed on to endure forever. And many hoped for the Founders Memorial, whenever and wherever it does get built, to ultimately stand for unity across divides. So I imagined that whatever Singaporeans had wanted for the Founders Memorial, they would want it for the Oxley House as well. So whether Oxley stays or goes or becomes a memorial garden with a basement, I hope we can find some compromise that will enable it to not go down in our history as a memorial that was born first in bitterness. Mr. Lee Hsien Yang seems open to the memorial garden idea, so hopefully that can be the beginning of some common ground that will move us all forward. Many Singaporeans in the process also referred again and again to the National Pledge written by our founders as still the best representation of the story they wanted Singapore to live out from generation to generation. So Singapore was, is, and must always be about more than one man or one family's values. And even the national pledge that most closely enshrines all our nation's values was not written by one man alone. It went through a long chain of drafting, starting from a Mr. Philip Lau, Mr. George Thompson, then S. Rajaratnam, various ministry officials, and then Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, and then submitted to the cabinet for final approval. I have come to believe that nations are really just families writ large. Psychologists who study resilience in families notice that the more children know about their family history, the stronger their sense of personal agency, self-confidence, and capacity to face challenges. It also turns out that a pattern of the story told by each family matters. Some families tell their children an ascending narrative with a constantly upward, upbeat, hopeful trajectory, and some families tell a descending narrative with a constantly downward, depressing, and pessimistic trend. But what was interesting is psychologists discovered that both these kind of families are not resilient. It is those families that tell an oscillating narrative instead, a roller coaster trajectory of a tale with ups and downs that consistently produce the most resilient children, because they understand that highs and lows are part of life and problems are best faced together rather than apart. The oscillating family story helps them develop a strong intergenerational self, a purposeful awareness that they are part of something larger than themselves. So yes, I know many Singaporeans are deeply saddened by all that has happened so far, and many want this conversation full of suffering to just end. I hope we do not artificially shut down the conversation, because learning to talk about our biggest mistakes and our darkest imperfections and our most painful wounds from our past is precisely what our younger generation needs right now as a country if we hope to be resilient. This season in our political history need not be part of a descending narrative, but an oscillating one. If this event helps us to start to talk more openly about how things work in our country and how we want things to work in our country, the good and the bad, it is possible still for us to come out of this saga even stronger as a people. Thank you.